Okay, good day everyone. In this session, we are going to start on this topic of value stream mapping. So as you're aware, VSM or value stream mapping is one of the core lean tools, and it evolved from the Toyota production system, and it has continued to be used as one of the core tools in most lean implementations. So from the outline of the session, we will look at process and a value stream view. So this is important to understand how we look at what we do from a process perspective. Then we will go into the concepts of value stream mapping and the language as we call it. And then we'll take a few examples to show what the steps and metrics used in value stream mapping are, and then end with a discussion on how we would implement VSM. So this is a quote by one of the stalwarts in this area called Deming. And as you can read, what he says is if you can't describe what you're doing as a process, you don't know what you're doing. So basically what Deming says is every kind of operation we do or sets of operations, we should try to make it a process. And only when we see it as a process can we bring about improvements in it. And as we know that this is one of the basics of lean, that we are looking at making the things we do, processizing it, and then bringing in efficiencies into the process. So if we look at then what is value stream? So it's very important for us to understand when we look at a process that there is a value stream in the process. So if we just go with the definition, a value stream is a set of actions that take place to add value for customer from initial request to realization of value by the customer. So anything we do, there is a process, and in each step of the process there's value added possibly. And as the process flows, that is there's value being added, and that's a value stream. So here you have an example of raw material coming in. There is a stamping process, a machining process, assembly, and at each stage, for example, does stamping add value? Yes, there is value because the customer wants some value added to it, and stamping is one of the requirements of the process. So some part of machining adds value, assembly adds value. The customer finally gets the end product the way the customer wants it, but in each step of the way there is some value added, and the whole process when we look at it and where value has been added is a value stream. Okay, so it's important not only to understand the value stream as a tool, but also to understand what a value is and what value stream is as a concept, because the tool is there to support the basic concept. So the tool can be modified, the tool can be adapted, the tools, some of the metrics we decide today can be adapted and evolved and even changed, but these core concepts remain the same. Okay, so when we go into value stream mapping, okay, so now we discussed what was kind of a process. We looked at what the value stream was with respect to the process. Now when we look at what is value stream mapping, it's basically a special type of flow chart that uses symbols known as the language of lean to depict and improve the flow of work and information. So we looked at what a value stream is, right? So all our value stream map does is instead of putting it into what you call the real world process like this, we can show icons, etc. It translates it into some kind of a language of lean. So the parameters which we use from a lean perspective can be depicted here. Symbols can be depicted here. And when we show this chart, people understand what the whole process is. And when we use a standardized language, that means communication becomes easier. I don't need to show icons and customized diagrams like this. I can show a value stream map and people will understand what is happening. Okay, so there is a lot to be said when something is visual. I mean, as we know that when we see a map, we are able to make out, many more things than we just look around and see where we are. Okay, so we can give a lot of examples where a big picture view of what we are doing makes us think and understand where we are rather than just looking at things from a numerical perspective or a text perspective. So when we take this in the context of construction, so when we look it's always easy to say there's a process in manufacturing, there's an assembly line, there's value added, all of these are kind of easy to relate to in the manufacturing domain. But when we take the construction domain, Okay, so we can see, this is an example we used earlier. You have a building design. Now the design has to kind of transform itself into the physical product. So there is we know that there's a process flow. We know that it is not as well structured as a manufacturing process flow, but there is still a process that needs to be done to convert the building design to the physical product. We can look at the macro view of the process. For example, what could some of these arrows indicate? What do you think?
The activities of the WBS, like all the things.
Yeah, it could be foundation, structure, finishes. It could be, these are the larger processes that are constituting in big arrow, in terms of the big arrows. I could go into the micro level. Okay, so for example, this is at a very detailed level. This talks about wall, this talks about formwork, this talks about reinforcement, so all of these micro level processes basically contribute to the construction and the fact that design can be transformed into a constructed physical construction. So even in construction, we have processes, and is there value added in each of these phases? Yes, there is value added in each of these phases. So there is a value stream, and if I can map the value stream, okay, then I can study the process from a macro perspective or from a micro perspective. And what is the objective of looking at it from a macro or micro perspective?
Depends on how detailed you want.
Right. But if I look, what is the objective of mapping all this?
You should know exactly where the value is getting increased.
Right. And then I want to try to improve the process.
Yes.
Right. So whether I want to do this improvement at a macro level or I want to do this improvement at a micro level, it depends on me. Okay, micro level will take a lot of detail, will take a lot of effort to do this mapping. But at a macro level, I might be able to do some level of mapping, some level of benefit, but the scales are different. Okay, so what you see here is not a value stream map. It just shows that there is a process associated with construction and there is value added in each stage. So if we look at value stream mapping, just as we discussed in the macro and the micro perspective, in the macro perspective, it can be strategic. Okay, we need senior management inputs. It impacts policies, inter-unit kind of coordination and a system level change. The same concepts applied into a detail or at the frontline level. We look at more detailed metrics. We look at intra-unit. We look at process improvement. So the concept of a value stream, the way I have seen it applied in general, when we talk about value stream mapping, it's more at a strategic and at the strategic level. But we've seen the tools applied also at the detail and frontline level and to be quite effective. So we will kind of look at both of these aspects in this presentation, and from where we have seen applications in construction or in many of our projects today. Which do you think is easier to do?
Macro level is easier to do.
Macro level requires top management buy-in, requires interdepartmental coordination, tends to be more challenging. The micro level is within a department, within its own people, within its own thing, so it's easier to map and easier to bring about change.
So it is more time consuming, macro.
It is more time consuming, but then sometimes it's not the time consuming part or the effort that's a problem, it's a coordination of people that's a problem. If you remember, we have people, process, technology. Yes. Sometimes the people part is buying in of getting people to work with doing the macro level is more of an issue rather than the effort that goes into micro. Okay, so several of the implementations when we have gone to teams and said do a VSM, they found it it's easier to kind of start at the micro. And this is also suggested. You can start at the micro level, get used to how the tool works, and then start moving to the macro. But it all depends on how much of management buy-in you have, how much top management support you have, and how effectively the team works together. Okay, so this is another view of the same concept. Okay, so this is from one of the original developers or the people who made VSM popular. And this talks about, you can see, what we have is the focus here, is the focus on the process or on the system. Okay, so here we have, let me get this working. Yeah, so here we have process focus. Okay, here we have process focus and here we have system focus. Okay, so if I'm going to focus on my process, then I need more frontline involvement. If I'm going to focus on system, I need more senior management. Basically an extension of the same concept we just discussed. Are there any questions so far? Okay. Now, again, just continuing, because this is important, because there are two levels of VSM usage, or two levels in which flow and value can be viewed. So if we look at it at an individual level, you can see this is a boat where you have one oarsman is optimized and doing fast. It doesn't help because everybody needs to do this in a coordinated way. So optimizing a single process will not help the overall objectives. Okay, so when you look at a value stream, yes, I can look at this process alone and say, how can I make it better? Yes, there is a certain amount of benefit to it. Okay, if that person, for example, that oarsman happens to be the weakest person, improving him might improve the system. But only focusing on that oarsman and making a very big improvement or optimizing will not help the system, because the system works in coordination with it. Okay. Now, these are two key references which I've used for this presentation for VSM, and I find that these are, in terms of many of the concepts they are presented, the way they are presented, some of the terminologies are appropriate to the way we have been wanting to do this. So the first book, called Learning to See, is a classic. Okay, it is the book that actually made value stream mapping popular in industry. Okay, so you can see this was around 1999. Then in 2014, this book has actually adapted from some of these concepts, brought in more metrics, more detail into value stream mapping, and some of this is also what I will present in this session. And if you go to the book, actually it gives you more. Okay, I'm only presenting some of the key concepts here. Now, there are several other books and references in VSM, and there is somewhat varying terminology. You'll see that the terminology we use here is something we have been reasonably comfortable with, but there is varying terminology. The symbology almost remains the same, but what does one get out of VSM tends to marginally change, and that's okay, because that is the intent. You're ultimately trying to get improvement in the process flow. Okay, whether I do it by method A or method B, if the improvement is there and it can be experienced by the organization, that's what's important.